Wow, that is wide. Hello and welcome to the video. Now this video is going to be the review of the Samyang 14mm for the Sony E mount. So I've had this lens for well over a month now and I've already made 7 videos. So I've got a bit of an idea on how it works and things like that. I've had a decent run with it so far, so I think that I am in a position to be able to give a good enough review about it at this point. So a few of the specs first. This is the 14mm. It's an f2.8 to f22. I have the Sony E mount version, which weighs in at just less than 590 grams. It is pretty heavy. So the lens itself is, for a full frame lens, dirt cheap. And when buying this one, I did notice that you can get it even cheaper if you were to buy it in a Canon mount and then buy an adapter over to Sony E mount, but you're not talking much in that anyway, so it's probably not worth it. The lens does feel very sturdy. It has got a decent amount of weight to it. Now, the f2.8 is a really shallow aperture. And for such a wide angle lens, you might think that that's pretty pointless because you can't get a blurry background with something that wide. But actually, if you do get close enough to things, then you can see there's a decent bit of blur in the background. That 2.8 also makes it very good for astrophotography. I have got really into astrophotography recently just because of this lens. So an f2 or even lower would be better, but again, for the price of this, I paid just over £300 for it, and for a full frame lens, that is really cheap with an aperture that wide. So, seeing as I've mentioned star photography, let's get on to star photography. I've done a couple videos on star photography with this lens already, and I will link one of them up there, whichever one I think is the best one. Summary is, I love this lens for shooting the stars. It's so wide that you can have a really long shutter on it without the stars starting to turn into streaks. And also because the aperture is quite wide open at that 2.8, it means you can have your ISO lower, which means there'll be less grain in the pictures. Now let's talk about sharpness in the corners at the different apertures. So I've just got a couple of photos here. One that I've shot about an f8, and then the next one that I've shot at 2.8. Now, if I go into the corners on the 2.8, you can see it's quite blurry there. If we go stopping down to f8, you can see there's quite a lot more detail there in the corners as well. Again, same thing. Reasonable detail in the corner at f8. f2.8, it's a lot blurrier. It's still not that bad at all. And straight in the center at the f8, decently sharp, but right in the center at the f2.8, still decently sharp. So actually, it really isn't bad at all for a lens this cheap and a lens this wide. Okay, so 14mm, you can expect there to be some distortion in the corners, and especially for the star shots, when you go over to the corners, then the image does sort of fall apart. Now you can set up the profiles in Lightroom to remove chromatic aberration and also to sort out some of the vignetting and also some of the distortion in the corners. Personally, for video, I quite like the distortion in the corners. I think it gives it a unique look, which I really like. But for photo, if it's an issue for you, you can just crop it in and just cut out those corners. What I'll do though is I'll just show you very quickly how you do that in Lightroom and then how you do that in Final Cut. So in Lightroom, we'll just go down to the optics, enable the lens corrections, select the Samyang 14mm and in this case the E mount. So I'll show you what that looks like with and without. You can see there's a fair amount of difference there between them. What you can also do is continue stretching out the distortion in whichever way you like using the slider here. Now, if you're doing it in Final Cut, it is a lot more forgiving, I would say, firstly in video, but if you don't like the distortion in the corners for Final Cut, all you then need to do is, wow, my laptop is really unhappy about screen recording here. Okay, find the footage, over to the effects panel and search for fisheye. Drop that onto the footage, and then all you need to do is play with the amount, and you can see how it will stretch the image. So just stretch it to where you're happy with, and then you may have to zoom it in so that it doesn't cut out the corners. Very, very, very slight adjustments, and there you go. So that's the quickest way that I've found of fixing the distortion in Lightroom and in Final Cut. So moving on then, manual focus. There is a autofocus version of this lens. I don't know how good it is. I can't say how good it is because I've not used it. It is about £200 more expensive for the autofocus version. So for me personally, the point of buying this lens is because it's budget. So I just saved the extra 200 quid. Also, with it being so wide, it is very easy to catch focus. Virtually everything's in focus. If you just switch it over, if you just put the lens to infinity and then stop down the aperture a few clicks, virtually everything's going to be in focus anyway. You'll get used to it very quickly is what I would say. Now, I have had quite a few different Samyang lenses in the past, and I have an 85mm, which I'm shooting on now. I have the 14mm, and for my APS-C body, when I used to have a 6300, I had the 12mm for that. All brilliant lenses, cannot fault them at all. For the price, how wide they are with the shallow depth of field is really good. The build quality of them, they're reasonably heavy. They feel like they could take a beating. The optics on them, the sharpness is pretty good considering how wide they are in terms of aperture and also how cheap they are. And I also really like the colors that the Samyang lenses produce. They pretty much across the board make a very similar look, and I really like how it looks. What I wanted to do for this video as well was test it on a gimbal. Now, I never actually got around to getting a longer Arca Swiss plate for my gimbal. I've got a previous video on that gimbal and a review on that gimbal, which I can pop up there, but I haven't actually got around to getting a longer plate for it so that I'd actually be able to use this. Now, between this and the Sony A7 III, you are talking a fairly heavy combo there, so you will need a gimbal that can actually take the weight of it. Now, I haven't tested it on that gimbal, so I'm not able to say whether it works or not, but that means I'm just gonna have to make another video on that, so you can expect that at some point soon. The plate is only like 10 quid on Amazon, so it's just a case of getting around to it. Right. I said enough about what I like about the lens. It is time to say what I don't like about the lens. The very first thing about it is you can't fit a filter on it. Now, because of how wide it is, that lens is really bulbous, sticking out there. Now, they have put a lens hood on there, which is integrated. You can't take it off. And that is partly, I assume, to stop some light getting into it, but also to stop you from damaging it when it falls down, so just to protect the end of the lens elements there. Now, that is the reason why I put off buying this lens for so long, and the reason is because I couldn't put an ND filter on it. Now, I thought not being able to put an ND filter on it would be a really big issue for me. Like, firstly, I like to have ND filters, just cheap ones, on all of my lenses to protect the glass, so it doesn't get scratched or anything, it doesn't get dirty. Like this is, I'm constantly having to clean it, and I'm constantly worried that I'm gonna scratch it on something when I put it down, so I always have to carry this lens cap with me all the time wherever I go, and I hate that. I wanted to just be able to have an ND filter on it and then not worry about it, but it is what it is. I also thought that I wouldn't be able to expose the shots properly in daylight because I like a shallow depth of field, and this will just be totally overexposed in daylight when shooting is what I thought. But actually, again, because you can't really get that much of a shallow depth of field unless you get really close to something, at which point the depth of field is actually not that bad. But say if you're vlogging, for example, you can't get that close. So actually you can expose this really easy just by stopping down a little bit, or as long as you're not moving too much, you can just pop the shutter speed up a little bit. So it hasn't ended up being an issue as much as I thought it was going to be. That being said, I still would prefer it if you could get a filter for this. Now I have seen that there are some out there that like strap on over the lens and that, but I'm not interested in that. I want a screw-on one. So ideally, if this could have been, say, a 16mm instead and have the ability to screw on a filter, I would have much preferred it. Anyway, get used to it. It is what it is. The other thing about it that I don't like is the focus ring on it. It's got a ridiculously long focus throw. I would say that you're going basically a full 360 degrees to go from its shortest focusing over to infinity. And it just doesn't need that. Like on the other Samyang lenses, the focus throw is nowhere near as long as this one is. Now, maybe that would make sense for video, or maybe that would make sense for a longer focal length so that you can get precise on the focusing with the aperture being wide open. But on a lens that's as wide as 14mm, you just don't need that fine amount of focus. You just don't need it. So I don't know why it needs to be that long, but again, it just is what it is. I'm nitpicking here. So pretty much that is about all the negative things I have to say about it. So overall for me, this lens, another absolutely brilliant lens by Samyang. Really, really liking what they do in terms of price versus quality. Then they're pretty much as good as you can get in terms of cheap lenses for full frame cameras as well. Really, really impressed, and really impressed with this lens. I've really enjoyed having it. I really like the wide look, and it's got me out making videos a lot more again, which is something that's good because I've been struggling a bit in terms of creativity recently. So if you've been on the edge, not sure whether to buy it or not, I can quite comfortably say that you won't regret it if you buy it. So that's the end of this. Hopefully it was helpful in some way, and hopefully I'll see you again. So take care.